Hey everyone, this is 8-Bit Flashback, and I just got done with my latest build. This is the TurboGrafx 16 Classic Edition. Let's take a closer look. So this is a 3D printed case, and it's powered by Raspberry Pi 3, and it's exactly half the size of the original console that was released on August 29th, way back in 1989. The TurboGrafx 16 was the first 16-bit console on the market, although it only had an 8-bit CPU, but it did have a 16-bit video color encoder and a 16-bit video display controller. It was originally intended to compete with the Nintendo Entertainment System, but due to its late release in the US, it ended up competing with the Sega Genesis and then later the Super Nintendo. Due to its somewhat dated technology when compared to the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo, the TurboGrafx 16 failed to break through in the US. So even though its lifespan was very short-lived, it's still a huge part of gaming history. And I had a lot of fun building this console and flooding back all those memories from when I was a kid. I even took the time to make some miniature hue cards, and what these actually are is just SD cards with some labels on them. And these hue cards are completely functional. Each of these cards has their own Pi image on them, and when you load them into the console, it loads that specific game. And if you've already watched some of my other videos, then you probably already know that I really dig these miniature games. And for me, it's not about being practical, it's just about having some fun and reliving some memories. So what I have inside the console is a micro SD card to SD card adapter, and that's what the games load into. I thought this worked out pretty well, and it's pretty similar to how the original games loaded. HuCard games were very unique looking, and drastically different looking than Sega Genesis games and Nintendo games. The main difference is it didn't have the big plastic shell that surrounded the game, so that made them look very small and compact. I also installed a power button along with a shutdown script, that way it can safely shut down the Pi 3. And here's a look at it next to the Nintendo Classic Edition and the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, and it looks right at home. And here's a quick look at how I built the console. It all starts with the 3D printer, and this is a DaVinci 1.0. You can build a lot of cool stuff with a 3D printer, but unfortunately there's a lot of imperfections if you don't do some extra work. So here's a look at the case after it comes out of the 3D printer. And it looks decent, but there's definitely a lot of imperfections. So the first thing I have to do is cut all the port holes for the HDMI, the USB, etc. Then I take some sandpaper and I sand the entire case and get rid of all the big blemishes. Once I'm done with the rough sanding, I use filler primer to fill all the voids on the console so I can get a smoother finish. So here's a look at what it looks like before I use the filler primer, and here's after. So now it's time to sand the console again, but this time I wet sand it, and this is a 600 grit fine sandpaper, and this allows me to get a smoother finish on the case. And depending on how many imperfections there is on the case, sometimes I have to do 2 coats of filler primer and then wet sand it twice. So after I'm done wet sanding, I got a lot smoother finish. Now it's time to go ahead and spray it with the base coat, which is going to be a satin black. And normally I usually do 2 to 3 coats, then I finish it off with a satin clear to protect the finish. And here's a look at it after I'm done painting, and it looks quite a bit different. Now it's time to add some more details, like some fine detail painting and some decals. And these little small details really bring the console to life. And if you've ever built model cars, the process of painting and detailing the case is very similar. So there's quite a bit of extra work involved to make a 3D printed object have a finish like this, but I do this for a hobby, and I have quite a bit of fun doing it. Okay, I got this all plugged in and ready to test out, and for a controller I'm going to use a Wii U Pro controller. And this is a Bluetooth controller, and it works great with the Pi 3. And for a game, I'm going to load China Warriors, so let's go ahead and power this up and check it out. And for an intro, I have a commercial from back in the 90s for the TurboGrafx 16, and this is a great throwback. And this commercial would have aired pretty close to the end of its life in the US. Power up.
TurboGrafx 16-bit system that puts you in control.
Only $99.99. So when the game loads, it loads to a preview of the game, and you can just go ahead and select that game, or you can select one of the many other games that I already have loaded on the SD card. So now I'm going to go ahead and power it off to show you that shutdown script. We'll let it turn all the way off, then we'll go ahead and change the game, and we'll load Legendary Axe. And I always confuse this with Golden Axe. I always want to say Golden Axe, but it's Legendary Axe. So this is going to boot up pretty much the same way. It's going to load that same intro, but then it's going to load to the preview of Legendary Axe. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the intro. And there it goes. It loads the preview of the game, and we can go ahead and select that game, or again, we can pick from other games on the list and add pretty close to the full collection. So this game brings back some memories for sure. Back when I was a kid, probably 11 or 12 years old, I was finally getting myself the Nintendo Entertainment System. So I've been saving up my allowance for a year, and it's finally time to go get my Nintendo, and I'm so excited. So I go to my local electronics store, and what do I see? I see this new console, the Turbo Grafx 16. And now I want this console because it's got better graphics, it looks cool, I just wanted it so bad. So they had a Turbo Grafx 16 set up for display that you could play, and Legendary Axe was the demo that you could play. And I probably played this game in the store for at least an hour, and I was hooked. I wanted this console bad. But unfortunately, I didn't have enough money at the time, so I had to go with the original Nintendo Entertainment System. But looking back at this situation now, the Nintendo ended up being a much better console overall, it had a lot more support, and the lifespan was a lot longer. I did finally end up getting a TurboGrafx 16 later on in life. I was probably about 17 or 18. I found one at a pawn shop, and it was only $30, and it came with a Turbo Tap, 2 controllers, and 12 games. I'll probably never find a deal like that again. So even though I didn't own the TurboGrafx 16 when it came out, I still played it quite a bit. A couple of my friends had the console, and lucky for me, this electronics store that had it on display that I could play the demo was only a couple blocks from my school. So a lot of times when I got out of school, I'd run straight to the store and I'd play this console. Eventually I did get tired of it because it was only one game, but I did have quite a bit of fun playing in this store. For the short life that the TurboGrafx 16 had, it did have a decent lineup of titles. If they would have released this console in 1987, like they did in Japan with the PC Engine, who knows, their fate might have been much, much different. And oh yeah, speaking of the PC Engine, I got a couple projects in the works for that too. So for everyone out there that's interested in mini consoles, I'd like to hear your thoughts for which console I should build next. Leave me some comments down below. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. If you liked that video, please click that like button. If you want to hear more from me, please subscribe. And if you want to help support or sponsor the channel, you can now find me on Patreon. I'm going to be trying to do some behind the scenes videos, giveaways, and much more. Alright everyone, see you later, and have a great day.